Ooh, chilly. Well, welcome to windy Cape Town. I hope you're all having a good morning. It's lockdown shoot day, and yeah, I'm starting to get this feeling I shouldn't be doing it today, but I'm sticking to a schedule as much as possible during this lockdown. You know, I've got edits to do for my clients, outstanding edits, which I've been doing. I built some cabinets in the house, do work on my car, body filling on the body panels on my car. So I'm trying to keep as busy as possible so that I don't lose my mind. So today is lockdown day. So what I had planned in my mind was to do a portrait shoot of some kind, sort of in the small garden that I have. And I thought of using my daughters. Both my girls play field hockey, and they both really worked hard in the off season to make the hockey tour. But unfortunately, due to COVID-19, the hockey tour has been cancelled. So yeah, I'm actually more upset than they are. They actually handled it pretty well. They're pretty chilled about it. So fair play to them. But yeah, I was a bit bleak about it. But yeah, so I want to get a backdrop out of my office. I only got one there. Luckily, I've got it. I don't normally store it here, but it's a black paper backdrop. So I'm just concerned with this wind blowing it. So that's going to be a challenge, I'm sure. I'm going to get it up. Bring in maybe 4 flashes. I thought of maybe 2 speed lights and my 2 8200 separate, and do sort of a dramatic shot, almost like a night shot of them playing hockey. They'll be wearing black as well. I don't have AstroTurf, but I've got a little bit of lawn to use. I thought maybe bringing water in somehow, maybe hanging up a hose pipe of some kind and let the spray come between them and the backdrop and then light it up so it looks like they're playing maybe a night game with floodlights and rain coming down. I don't know. Just got something I've got in my mind. So it'd be interesting to see what I can come up with. I wouldn't say I've got limited gear. I mean, I'm sure people who got far less gear on them right now during lockdown than I do. But normally on these type of shoots, when I go out and do sort of these type of portrait shoots, whether it's athletes or whatever it is, I've got a fair amount more gear and I can rent gear and things like that. So yeah, I'm going to push myself a little bit here and see what I come up with. So let's get started. You can see it's very windy. We've just lost the backdrop. Where were we? Stay. Guys, hold. Have I got your undivided attention?
Yes.
Hold on for dear life. If the backdrop leaves the property, you can let go. I don't want you to go with it, alright? Just hold nice and tight. So where was I? Okay, so it's just the 8200 on the B2 forehead. What I've done is I've just stuck one bulb in because I've only got the one unit at the back. So it's running off the port 1, and it's running, if you put the bulb in the middle, you get just the one. And the reason why I put it in the middle, I get even light throughout the reflector. Then I've got the second light here. That's going to be like my rim light. It's going to come in from behind and act as sort of the full light as well as rim. So it's going to fill a little bit across the face. You're still leaving that sort of shadow bit running across the face, a little bit of drama, but it's enough to create that rim behind them so that you can see them like defined as opposed to sort of blending into that black backdrop, because both girls in the hockey shot are going to be wearing all black. Fallen in the wind. Got 2 little speed lights here, and the reason why I've used these lids is that they're going to prevent the light from the speed light hitting the backdrop. We don't want extra light on that backdrop. I'm going to underexpose the shot. Whoops, there it goes again in the wind.
And the wind. It's going badly. Wind. Just
Remain calm.
It's a long process, Dan.
I think this was my mom's.
Yes,
the grand spray. She gave it to us. She doesn't have a garden anymore. This has got like a mist adjuster, so I'm hoping that it gives us nice mist. And I put on a little rock. You got to see that. This is the best part. Good little rock on a string just to give it that weight. Otherwise, it sprays continuously at the backdrop. So I want to expose for the backdrop first. I want to make it as dark as possible by underexposing the shot. So this black goes proper black, and I don't have to do any post-production with the black. Then I'm going to then fill them with the light, and I'll adjust my lighting accordingly. I'll probably shoot at the sync speed of 250th because in a dark situation, you can actually freeze action with flash if you underexpose it enough. So I don't really need a fast shutter speed. I'm going to get them to be hitting hockey shots through here, not with the ball. I'm going to bring in the ball afterwards, but I'm going to try and get the shot as much as possible in camera, with only minor adjustments in post. So they're going to be taking a shot through here. The idea is that they're going to be in the finished position, the mist coming down. These two lights here light up the water without lighting the backdrop. The key light, which I've moved in my demonstration, is going to be lighting them. So the idea here is because they're hitting through the ball, you want to light them on the open side, but I've got it at pretty sort of a 90-degree angle, somewhere between 45 and 90 off them. So what that does is if it goes too far that way, the flash, effectively what you're doing is you're lighting up more of the face, and then you get like broad lighting, so the face gets a bit broader and wider and becomes too obvious. So I brought the flash in a bit, so it's going to light just over half of the face, maybe just drift over, could be a bit of Rembrandt, I don't know, but there should be a shadow line running down here. And then what happens is that flash here will light them up, give them that, because they're wearing black. We actually wanted them to wear black, so it's a black background with them wearing black. I just want a bit of drama, and I want the rim light to kind of give them an outline, and possibly light striking the face here, which kind of just leaves that dark strip. Light here, light here. What do you guys do?
I'm going like this in the background. Because you said, if you wanted us to wear black, 99.99.
Guys, what's the name of this channel?
John
Armstrong Photography. Is it called Tegan Armstrong Photography?
Yeah.
Is it called Carla Armstrong Photography?
Plus daughters.
And then I'll bring in a ball afterwards and sort of maybe out of focus, add a little bit of a movement to it in post-production, just so it looks like it's zinging past me on that side of the shot. So let's see how we get on. Lower into like a final position, so not too high with the stick, more like hitting through and rolling that wrist. Put that foot forward.
Right, step with it.
Yeah, go ahead. The whole idea is that
We're going to actually get
the whole point is as you're up, your eyes are going to be at me,
Okay, look for where you're going.
and then I'll bring in the ball afterwards.
Okay.
Okay, so do your best. Find that marker, use that marker properly, because my lights are set up for that marker. Okay, just do a couple of swings there. So, shoot is complete, lots of fun, big challenge though. Sure, that one was hectic, eh? So much energy was just spent trying to hold that set together. But my girls are such good sports, I'm really grateful to them for helping me. They were freezing their butts off, because as soon as the water from the spray got onto their bodies and the wind was blowing, shame, they were really cold. So I'm really grateful. I've loaded them onto Lightroom here. I've just already done the pick, so I've only just selected a few that I'm going to discuss with you. And yeah, so the whole purpose of the shoot was, the whole sort of the reasoning behind it is I was going to try and get as much done in camera as possible with as little done in post-production. So this isn't a video on how to go about doing post-production, to be quite honest. You might learn a few things, but I might do something later at another stage about on editing. This was to get it right in camera as best as possible. This is something I learned about very early in my career, and I've got to give credit to two people that my lecturers when I studied film production. And this wasn't photography, actually, this was motion picture production. And it was Adam and Cedric. It'd be quite funny if they're watching this. That would be hilarious. Sure, they were so happy to see the back of me when I left studying. I was I must have been a bit of a pain in the butt, because I was just a little bit energetic all over the show. You know, like I remember being on production sometimes, and I was in the camera department, and we were using 60mm film on an 60mm Arri camera. And like while I'm doing the camera department, I see someone battling with lights or doing something, and I would put my nose into their business and try and help them and adjust. And yeah, I just couldn't. I really battled, and I had to learn at a young age to focus. That was my big thing. Is that I try to do a lot of things at once, but nevertheless, I'm grateful for the things that they taught me. And two of the things that we learned in the first week of arriving. Actually, there were three things I learned in the first week of arriving, but two important things is that Cedric taught us not to force anything. So if it doesn't fit, just step back for a second, look at what you're doing, and then attempt it again. And that was in reference to gear. So if a lens doesn't click in properly, or if there's something in the way, just take a second to pause and look at what you're doing. Because on set, there's so much gear that's being moved around and you're fitting things, you could make the mistake. Now, obviously in photography, it's not quite the same way. The chance of you not being able to fit something is far less, but that was a valuable lesson I learned. The other thing I learned from Adam was do everything you can in production. Don't rely on post-production. And I'm sure it's still applicable today, although so much of what we see in our media, in our TV, and our everything is really post-production driven and less so on the front end. So I've taken that into my career and it's been a massive help. So a lot of the time, I have a vision in my mind of what I want to do. I try and implement it as much in camera as I can, and then the bonus is there for post-production to sweeten the deal. But yeah, so I understand that's not always the situation in all types of photography. And the third thing, funny enough, was how to wrap a cable, lighting cables or whatever it is, how to wrap it and rotate it so that it perfectly wraps in a circle and you don't get those kinks in the wires. So when you hang it up and the next person takes it, it's easy to unravel and easy to ravel up again. I know that sounds crazy, but I did a solid lecture just on how to wrap cables and how to rotate your wrists when you're wrapping it so that it has a perfect circle. Trust me, these little things really do help, and I was very grateful for that. Now, when it comes to that vision I was talking about, and obviously the purpose of the shoot is to try to get it in camera as best as possible. What is interesting is that a lot of people that I speak to who are getting into photography and getting into editing in particular, they really do battle with this aspect of editing. Not so much learning the software. They can go do courses, they can learn it themselves. It's like when they get the image, what do they do with the image? And that's often the case because they didn't really have a vision before they started shooting. So they didn't have an understanding of what the end goal was. So when it comes to editing, they're going to kind of run profiles over it or presets over it, or they're going to edit a bit, do 20 variations and then stick with one and then still be unsure about that one. So that's actually a massive part of editing, is to understand what you want, a style that you have, and then run with it, because you don't want to be spending too much time on each image. So what's interesting about this is I shot in a way where I would try and spend as little time in post on this. So this video is not really about post-production. Although I might add one in at a later stage, even though I find that a very difficult topic to talk about, because a lot of the things I do editing are instinctual. I'm not conscious of what I'm doing. I've done it for so long that I just do it. So I've actually got to try formulate it and then teach it back to you. So I'll try work on that at some stage. Yeah, the vision is very important. So that was the one criteria. Now, obviously there were challenges in the shoot, not making excuses. I did have enough there to get the shot done, but the challenges was that I had prime lenses. I wasn't going to shoot wide. So if you can imagine a backdrop, it's only so wide, and I wasn't prepared to roll the whole backdrop out and stick it on a wall or something like that, especially with the wind. I had to lower the backdrop quite low, not as high as I wanted it to be, because as soon as I went up above that, the wind just whipped it, because I was just below where the heaviest wind was. Even though it was whipping it already, it would have just taken doesn't matter how many rocks I put on the stands and on the paper, it just kept blowing it over. So that was one thing. But one thing about backdrops is that quite often you either got to stand right next to the backdrop, which is not always easy because then you create shadows and your lighting has to be really, really accurate. And that's all types of photography when you're doing studio work, is when you get close to a backdrop, you're bringing in elements that you'd have to remove in post-production. So it makes it harder. So sometimes just stepping off that backdrop a bit allows you a little bit of breathing space. You can light the background separate to the foreground. Shadows aren't much of an issue, and then you can work with your modifiers and stuff like that. So the lens choice is very important, because the closer you get to your subject and the wider your field of view or your focal length is, the more the outside of my backdrop is going to come into play. And then I'm having to edit in black stripes, and then I don't get that water that's going over that black. So then I have to do a lot of manipulation where I bring water in from other sections into that. Now that can be done. You can, if you were on a serious shoot and you were kind of limited with your backdrop, but you had time and you had people who were going to do retouching for you, that's pretty easy. I mean, a lot of retouchers could do that. But that wasn't the purpose of the shoot. So first decision I had to make was what focal length I was going to use. So obviously using I wanted a tighter field of view. So I wanted to use a longer focal length. So I first wanted, my mind, when I woke up in the morning with my idea, I kind of thought, well, the 90mm makes sense, because I'll go back further, sort of get that sort of narrow field of view. I step them off that backdrop so I have space for the water. and I'll be able to sort of tightly go in past them so I can pick up on the black and I don't have to do any post-production, which is one of the goals I was trying to achieve. When I did set up for it, that backdrop is as far as it can go. I had to create the space for the water and then them, because I couldn't have the water just pouring on them because it would be messy. I just wanted the water to be spraying around them, make them wet and not too much in their way, but it looked like it was kind of over them. I couldn't go back anywhere I positioned this backdrop, also trying to avoid the heaviest wind areas. The 90 was too tight. So I could actually get them, but as soon as I swung the hockey stick would then go out of shot. So then I resorted to my 56 because I have no zoom within that area because of the type of stuff that I usually do. So the 56 was great, maybe slightly too wide, but what I decided to do is either way, if I'm going to shoot a landscape or portrait, it doesn't make any difference because what I'm trying to do is get as tight as possible on them, enough space so that when they swing their hockey stick, if it goes further in one shot than the other, I'm always going to get it. That was one criteria, but I then could make a square crop, which is kind of what I envisioned. Now, the reason for the square crop is that I was worrying about the grass. Now, obviously it's not Astro, and I think Astro would have worked differently. So now in retouching, what you would have done is that you would have got the team in, they would have just brought in Astro, angled it correctly in Photoshop, and then laid it under the feet of the hockey player, and then sort of blended it into the black background as if it's getting black into the distance, and it sort of disappears into the darkness. So what I could have done in the grass is that I could have just copy and pasted the grass, extended it beyond them over where the bricks are lying on the bottom of the paper, and then blended it in with sort of dodge and burning so it looked like the grass was transitioning away into the darkness. So that would be one way. But again, that's a lot of post-production, and that's what I was trying to avoid in the shot. The other aspect I really battled with, and I'll show you in the imagery, is that I was trying to flag that the 2 speed lights at the back, and as it turned out, the speed lights, I thought in my mind they'd be maybe quarter power. It would be enough to light up that water. They did if I put the spray on very strong, but then it just looked like a shower of water. So I had to turn it to the mist function, and then the lights themselves at quarter power weren't really powerful enough to pick up on those drops. So I had to go to full power. Now I flagged the lights so that the lights wouldn't touch the backdrop, and I wasn't able to flag it on this side. I tried to, you can adjust the sort of the angle of the light, and I did that on the speed lights. I got them more narrow in their sort of projection of light. But where I wanted my girls to be with the water, so that some of the water touched them, unfortunately these lights fell on them as well. So not only was I getting my light in front, my rim from the back, these lights were kind of hitting them as well. Now, in camera, looking through my viewfinder, I knew it wasn't great. In post, it's probably a little bit worse than what I'd hoped for, but which I'll show you now. So that was one aspect, and you can see it as soon as I turned those lights in a bit more, where more fell on the backdrop and lighting them up, they looked a lot better. But then the water wasn't getting the light that I wanted, and the backdrop was now too light, and I didn't want to go in and darken the backdrop and work on all the water, because that's a lot of post-production. So in these situations, normally you would have a lot more gear. You'd probably be more in a controlled environment, and you'd use flags. Flagging is very important. People just think of modifiers and lights, but flagging light, actually blocking it off and putting it into channels, whether you use snoots or grids or whether you use actual flags, which are just things on stands that actually block light. A lot of that is very, very important in these shoots. So it was pretty interesting to see what I could get with pretty limited gear. With not that much control of it. I didn't use any modifiers except for the reflector. I just wanted one. I do have a couple of softboxes and umbrellas, but they just would have been whipped, and I didn't have people to hold them, so that wasn't going to work. But I quite liked, with smaller heads like your speed lights and your Fresnel head on the 8200, it actually gives you a nice hard sharp light, and I think it actually suits sports. Kind of gives you that aggressive lighting, which I think is pretty cool. The next aspect was the actual camera itself. So I was using the XT4 in the shoot. It was a pleasure to use. Such a beautiful camera. Nice having that battery as well, the new battery, which I've spoken about. So I did the shoot with the 56, as I mentioned, with the XT4. Now, a very important feature on any of the X series cameras is that you have, obviously the whole point of a mirrorless camera is that you're getting a preview, an instant feedback of your exposure and your depth of field. So when it comes to flash photography, there's a couple of things you've got to note. It's very important, is that your ambient light and your flashlight are not two separate exposures because you're making one exposure, but in a way they are, because you're controlling light differently. So in this situation, I'm trying to deliberately underexpose my ambient so that my black goes as black as possible on the backdrop, and then bring in the light. But with flash, you're only seeing the effect, because I didn't have modeling feature, you're only seeing the effect as you fire the shot, and that's when the lights go. In this situation, when I underexpose for the background, my daughters are gone. They're totally dark and black. You can't see them. You can see just a little bit of the writing on the hockey stick because it was white where it says Griffin. So what you've got to do in this is you've got to turn off your preview. So you've got to turn off the fact that the EVF and the LCD are giving you an instant feedback of what your exposure is. So you've got to go into the menu and you've got to go to preview in manual mode, off, basically, effectively. So what I've done is, and you can actually see it if you go into my XT series cameras exposure settings, where I go over how I expose for natural light situations, flash, priority modes, full manual mode. I've done quite an extensive video on that, which I'll put at the end of this video. You can go check that out. I actually create a function button. So I use the D-pad at the back and I use one of the function buttons here. So when I hit that, it turns off the preview and it just gives me like a bright view that has no correspondence to what my exposure is. So in that way, I know my exposure for ambience is right, but now I can see my subject. What's quite interesting about this is once you've got a static shot, which I did because I had the camera on the tripod, you actually don't need to use the viewfinder or the LCD as well. You know where your framing is. You can actually just hold the shutter, look forward at what's going, and at the moment hit the shutter because you don't have to do anything because they're static. They're on the mark. You framed it. You know, and I actually didn't even go manual focus. I actually left the tracking on for the face detect, and it worked beautifully, better than I thought actually. I don't normally use that, so I was quite surprised. So all I did is I kind of looked forward and then fired the shot, and then occasionally I looked through just to make sure that I was happy with what I was getting on a playback or whatever it was. What is very interesting about this is that the XT4, when I underexposed, I had it on face detect, and I didn't deliberately have it on face detection for autofocus. I was actually going to go to manual. But even in the underexposed shot, I couldn't see their faces at all. And you just see the block moving around. Wherever they walked in the scene, this thing was just watching them. Now, obviously, the new feature of the XT4 is that it can focus in really low light. Now, this technically isn't low light. I've underexposed good light. But it was so it's not like it's searching in low light situations for focus. It's not doing that. But what was interesting is that it was very accurate in the way it was just face detecting and moving around where I couldn't even see their face in the viewfinder, which I thought I'd share with you. And then just the trigger. I just used the X1T trigger. It's the Fujifilm Godox trigger. It is TTL and high-speed sync enabled. It's the slightly older version of this. I think there's newer ones now. And all I did was I set up the 4 channels A, B, C, and D. Now I'd already used this before in something else, so normally I would put my key light or my front light as A, rim light B, and then the 2 speed lights at the back would be C and D. But as it turned out, my 1 speed light was A already, so I just did the 2 speed lights at the back as A and B, front light was C, and rim light was D. And I just set each power manually. And because I was shooting at 2/50th of a second, I didn't have to worry about high speed sync. So it's pretty easy. You can build it one light at a time with your subject, and then just power each one up. So you can actually, if you set up your first key light, you can turn everything else off on whatever A channel, adjust the lighting until you want it there, then turn off A, your front light, and then go each one independently, and that's the way you build it. So you can see exactly where the light is interfering, because sometimes when you're setting it up and you let them all run together, it's quite hard to see the independent light's effect on your subject. So that's just something to bear in mind as well. It's a quick way. I use the base ISO of 160, which is your base raw ISO, even though in the end I didn't end up using the raw image. The shutter was set to 250 of the second, which I've said, which is the sync speed. I chose not to use high speed sync. And just a note on that, when you have an underexposed image like I did, or you're in a dark environment, the pulse of the light freezes the action. And in this case, from experience, I know that at 2/50th of a second, when you underexpose even bright ambient light or brightish ambient light, wasn't very bright today, that what happens is the light can still freeze the action, but like on the hockey stick, there's a little trail of movement. There's a little bit of something there that's not quite freezing it like a shutter would. And that kind of adds that cool little flick, because if I froze them at 8,000th of a second, it would be too neat. It would be too obvious that they've been sort of like in a static position, and you want that movement. You want to have that sense that they're actually playing the game. So I find that 250th, keep to the sync speed, lower your ambience, hit them with a flash. It kind of has a little bit of something there, which I think is pretty cool. And then as it turned out, I was shooting at f8. All right, so let's get into the edit. So what I've done is I've actually picked 2 shots per each of my daughter, but I just want to show you up front the actual exposure was in the beginning. So let me just take that out. Okay, so that would just be a natural light exposure. You know, that's just exposing for ambience, no flash, nothing. You can see how the backdrop then shows details. It's not totally black, the backdrop. The light on her is even, but that's not the effect that we're looking for. So I just wanted to show you that first up. Obviously now you can see that I've underexposed the background. So I'm a few stops under, and I've now set up my key light on this side, and I've set up my rim light on that side. But you can obviously see how the rim light's coming around, lighting up, creating a little bit of definition there, which is what I wanted. I wanted it to separate from the background. And at no point, I just make sure at no point am I losing any detail there. So that the highlight in the skin hasn't gone too far that I've lost detail. So that's very, very important. So those are your first two. So at this point, I was pretty confident how I wanted it. But obviously now this is where it gets tricky. The whole point of this is that I'm kind of looking for a square somewhere within this area, cropping on just above the knee. Just something I learned from film production. When you do cropping, it's very important. Well, photography, you learn it as well, but I learned it in film production. You don't crop. You've got to be careful horizon lines hitting people across the chin, across the neck. You basically put the heads on a platter, so you don't want a crop line either there. You don't crop on knees, on elbows, on wrists. Generally, now obviously photography, you can break as many rules as you want, and sometimes those will work, but those are just general guidelines. So for example, when you're doing a crop on something, you don't crop them kind of at the knee there. You're either going to crop them halfway down the shin, which is acceptable, or you crop them on the thigh, more like that. So this is pretty important as to how you go about cropping. So the whole idea is I'm looking for a square crop in here. So either down there in this situation, obviously the stick would be more I'm just obviously showing you on a shot that I didn't use, but kind of that kind of idea. That's what I'm looking for. All right, so now we obviously put the water on the shot, we've got it going, and then kind of this is the shot that came out of it. So these are tips, because what I actually had to do is because I made the mistake and I totally forgot that the FUJIFILM RAWs, on the RAW software is not out yet to read the RAW files in the XT4, so Lightroom can't read the RAW file. Luckily for me, SilkyPix, which is Fujifilm's own software, or it's another company that they license as their software, was able to read the RAW, and all I did was I didn't do any adjustments in SilkyPix, I just saved it straight to a TIFF. So yeah, it is a large file, but it doesn't have the RAW capabilities for editing. But you remember the whole purpose of the shoot was that I wasn't going to do a lot of editing. So you can see that the skin tone's changed because she's now wet. The water's coming down. There's a little bit of stick movement that I was talking about. Remember I was talking about the 2/50th of a second sync speed underexposing flash going off. You can see the stick it's not that clean that you would get from a shutter speed. But I think it's nice because it adds a little bit of movement to the shot. And you can actually see where the water's spraying up, and it's kind of, and you can see with the wind moving the water that it hasn't filled the whole area like I wanted to. But because she's nice and wet, there's a bit of water in front of her as well. I can still have some connection to this image. This is where that flagging was very, very important. Obviously, I couldn't flag it. I was limited in what I had in the wind and all. You can see how these parts irritate me. To lose detail like that, and that's not the rim light. That's the light that's coming up to light the water. On the face there, you see it going through around the ear. Now, luckily, those are controlled. I can still see detail, but this part here, I've lost it. I can still work, you know. I'm very pedantic, like I'm very, very strict on myself when it comes to highlights and shadows in certain situations. If you've got to blow out something, it has to be obviously blown out. Like for me, when you blow out the sky on purpose because that's the way you're going to light it, that's fine. That's a deliberate action. But for me here, because I have control of light, that irritates me because that shouldn't happen. You can see it here again on the arm. That's detail totally gone. It even starts to get a little bit of a sort of purple tinge to it when it starts going beyond those certain situations. You can see the back of her head's been hit with that light. And they're not going to be happy, my daughters, with me, because I've chosen shots where their faces are a little bit awkward. I did two types of shots. I got them to actually hit it and I took the photograph, and I got them to finish in a position and then took the photograph. And every one of those has got the lovely face, but it's not real. You don't have that connection like they're actually playing hockey. So she's frowning a bit, but because she's actually hit through the ball, so she's using a little bit of sort of her face, you know, face is part of that shot. It's kind of showing a little bit of strain as it's coming through, so I prefer it. So yeah, so the lighting's not great. You can see where the water's now hitting the backdrop and it's picking up a reflection from the light, which is fine. I can get rid of that. There's the bricks holding it, and there's the grass. I've chosen kind of different shots for both my daughter. I'm going to go ahead and show you the one I've chosen for Tegan. So Kyla's first. That was Kyla there. And this is Tegan here. Yeah, they are twins if you're trying to figure that out. I have another one of Tegan where she's actually hitting through the ball and it kind of looks, oopsie, sorry, I'm still got the thing on, I'm just turn that off. Where kind of it's a nicer shot because she's hitting through the ball. But the reason why I chose it, and it's more personal, is that Kyla she's an attacking player. She's a forward, so she's got a knack for finding the goal, but she's not keen on contact. So and it's weird because their personalities, Kyla's a little bit more feisty, Tegan's a little bit more of a lovebird, hugs, kisses all the time. But on the hockey field, that flips. I'm sure you've all seen that with your kids. You'd be surprised in certain situations who they actually are. You thought you knew them. So Kyla's quite a skillful player. She's a bit more flashy, great at finding the goal. But when there's 2 or 3 players running in to get a ball, that's not her favorite place to be. She wants to get out of there. She wants space. She wants to be able to move around players. Where Tegan, on the other hand, skill level's not quite there, but she's got this thing that this is my goal, and you're going to know when you visit my area. I'm going to let you know that I'm there, so the next time you come, you're going to regret coming in the first time. So she's a little bit of a lumberjack. She cuts cheese down and she gets stuck in, and she puts that little bit of intimidation in, which is part of sport. So I felt that this positioning on her was more of a defensive position. That's why I chose that photograph. Sorry to give you the background of my family, but just wanted to give you an understanding as to why I chose these photographs. And again, they actually are in action. I never chose the finished position shot. Here she's actually swung it, and that's why her face is a bit awkward. But I think it actually looks like she's actually playing. And whether I'll bring the ball in afterwards, I'm still undecided. I've got the balls here. I took photographs of them. I did one in focus and one out of focus. So I can cut them out, take the orange out of it because they use the orange balls in practice. But on match day, they're actually using the white ball. And I might just put a bit of a motion blur on it. So I'm undecided, but we'll check that out. So let's go to Kyla here. All right, so I'm going to do that crop as I said I would. Okay, so I want to crop her on her thigh there, and I want to get as much of that water as possible. I love the way the water sprays up on the top of the stick. So I'm thinking of something like that. Now, obviously, I could also do a 4x3, which I have considered, where you do a 4x3 and you rotate it the other way. So you bring it in so you get more of that background. And so that is an option. But I just thought of the 2 square shots, which I just prefer. But just to let you know, obviously, there's lots of different variations to this. You don't have to do a square crop. So, yeah, so there it is there. That's kind of what I'm looking for. All right, so there's already a lot of contrast. So the first thing I'm going to do, which I could do in Photoshop as well, but I'm going to do it in here in Lightroom just to speed it up, is I'm going to go over these reflection points, which I'm trying to get rid of where you were. And now, unfortunately, the way the water was, which I was a bit disappointed, is that this whole bottom right side of the image got no water just because the wind was blowing and swirling. So again, if I was going to take this a bit more seriously and do more post-production, a lot of this water here, I would have sort of copied across onto this section of the photograph. It is pretty flat image because of the fact that it was a raw, not changed, and then made into a TIFF straight away. Yeah, so let's see if I can bring in a little bit more to her. I'll probably darken that background a little bit more. Get a little bit more contrast going in the shot. Okay, so now you can see I'm losing the white areas of the shot, but you can see a little bit more drama in the shot. Bringing the highlights down a little bit like that, bringing a little bit of clarity there, gives it a little bit of an aggressive sort of look. I don't like using clarity too much. I just think it's an overused thing in photography. That's kind of one way, and I'd probably go into my channels because I don't like the orange on the skin the way it's reflecting, so I'll just go the orange and I'll bring the orange down like that there. Maybe just a little bit of vignette to bring in the eye towards her. So there's a hint of blue there. The color temperature on the back flashes kind of gave this blue effect. So I want to get rid of that. So there's not a lot of blue in what she's wearing. So there's one way of doing it. You just go to your HSL slider and you actually go to the channels themselves. Now you can either spot pick the channel and you can actually go look for the colors there. And then you can see it doesn't really affect her too much, but that whole background goes down and you can see which colors are involved there because I've picked it. And you can take that out of it. Now the blue actually kind of, some people might prefer the blue. I don't. So that's one way of attacking it. Now, but obviously by bringing in those different elements and the way the light hits her cheek here, you could also sort that out as well just to neaten it up. Again, I don't want to edit too much because that's not the point of the shoot. I'm trying to get it right in camera as best as possible. A little bit of a drop in her cheek there. I could probably just take that out a little bit, just get rid of a little bit of the opacity on that. And that kind of just makes her cheek look a little bit better that side. Right, so that's Kyla. Let me just, if you don't mind, I'm going to indulge just a little bit in editing. I'm going to take it into Photoshop, edit a copy with adjustments. And I'm going to sort out her hair. That is bothering me. And it's amazing the quality that the XT4 gives you for an APS-C sensor. It's just insane. I mean, I use the GFX 50R, and it's just insane how well this camera does in comparison to a 50 megapixel medium format sensor. All right, so I'm just going to harden off the edge of this clone stamp. And I'm just going to clone stamp quite close to it. So I'm just going to neaten up the hair. I don't like all those little bits that are coming into the shot there like that. So just neaten it up just a little bit. There's a little bit of movement in the hair, which is nice. It's almost like her ponytail is bounced up, and I think that kind of adds to the shots. I don't want to do too much damage. Now, obviously, if you're dealing with adults or models or things like that, you would probably then go in and do skin softening and all the different things. I mean, as a child, I think personally for myself, you leave them as natural as possible. I want to remember my girls as they are. So, my wife will be happy. Happy wife, happy life. Okay. So now I go to Tegan. All right. So again, we're going to go in with that crop. Now the differences here is that there might be a little bit of work that needs to be done on the bottom section because her stick is a lot lower, and that's going to be a little bit tricky with the crop. But so I'm going to have to get rid of a little bit of grass. But I prefer her body position. It kind of suits her more. Okay. A little bit more water that's fallen here. She's quite lucky because obviously the wind wasn't blowing at that stage as much. So again, you can crop quite close on the middle of on the shin, so it works out okay. And just sort of be the bottom of the stick. So we're going to have to get rid of this area here, the rock, that, and make sure that the water continues down pretty naturally. Again, we've lost this highlight on the side of it, and this really bothers me. This is actually worse than Kyla's. I've still managed to control the face. I did a few shots, but I just couldn't, certain parts of the body I just couldn't control without being able to flag that light properly. Just to show you an example, which is I showed you earlier, that this shot just shows you what I did was I turned the speed lights in a bit more on the backdrop. You can actually see the light up here on the backdrop, lightening it up. And it's almost missing that water. It's only picking it up a little bit. So this shot, I actually really prefer the lighting on Tegan than what the other one is, because her arm's in check. There's nothing, like it's not over the top, the lighting on her. But then I'm not able to get the water like I wanted to. So you can see the trade-off that had to be made. So you can go back to what you look like there. Some might actually prefer it, but you can see how the water now comes into play, and that's the whole point of the shoot. But the sacrifice is just that detail that's lost in certain areas. And yeah, those who know me well know that losing highlights is one of my pet peeves if it's something I can control. So let's get stuck into Tegan's photograph here. All right, so there's not much that needs to be done except for these areas here. So let me just use the healing brush here, and I'm going to bring back some of these reflective points. But I think that's fine. So again, let's just do a global adjustment on Tegan just to lighten it up. Just a little bit of clarity there. Bring out the shadows a bit more, see, not too much. Actually, vibrance I don't need. Bad habit. I think that's pretty close to where I want it to be. Just check those highlights a bit again. And then just the orange as well, because as soon as I raise the contrast, their skin goes a little bit too orange. So I just bring that a little bit, and then there was a little bit of red in there as well. So the hue, I just take that out a little bit. And then there's less blue in this, but there is a little bit of blue coming through. I just bring the blue out a little bit. Saturation, the colors, and then the aqua as well. So the water goes a bit more natural. Yeah, okay, so do we need to do the griffin stick as well? Let's do that. You can see this is a good example as well. The actual stick blends into the water a bit, almost like that blur effect that I was talking about at 250th has come into play here. Stick's not exactly what you would call sharp. It just shows a little bit of movement, and I quite like that. You can actually see how it's almost blended into the background. You're almost losing the stick, and you're almost losing it because it's blurring. But I think that it kind of adds to the shot here. So let's just put the contrast up, the highlights up, the whites up, and let's paint these griffin back into the stick here. Let's get it nice and sharp. Not the grip, quite like the grip dark, the face of the hockey stick. Turn it down just a little bit. There, I think that's cool. All right, let's take Tegan into Photoshop. All right, so let's get rid of these different aspects here. Let's clone tool some of this water here over the brick. I think that's pretty much it. And then go sort out her hair like I did before, and I might actually vignette, which I forgot to do. Let's have a look here. Pick an area that's pretty close to it. I kind of like the curls on this side. I don't want to get rid of all of them. That's very cool. I like that. And now I'll go and I save that back. Let's go have a look at it, and I need to just vignette it, and I need to get rid of that green on the bottom of the hockey stick. Just darken just a little bit on those edges, just to draw your eye in a bit. And then just go in on that there, and you can see where the green has come in. So you want to go to, there's no green in the shot, so you can actually see, you could either desaturate that area, but because there actually is green here, you can actually go and you can just remove the green. You can actually see where the green goes, and let me just double check I'm not affecting any part of the image. Some colors have green built in. Now you can see it's only the hockey stick, so that green is now gone. Let me start with this one quickly. Let me just do a little bit of a crop in on it, even closer. I did crop in a little bit earlier, but I want to go in really close not to waste time. Okay, so there it is there. And let's just drop that across onto Kyla's shot. And let's size it down to where we need it to be. In a way, it's quite nice. It might actually fill the part of the picture where it's a lot blacker, so it might actually work. Just kind of looking that direction as well. So let's just go with that, for example. So now we want to create a mask, and obviously just want to paint that back out. Sometimes leaving a little bit of an edge, especially if you're going to go do motion blur, does help. I'm still not convinced whether a ball is the way to go, to be honest. I don't know if it's the way we should be going with this. I quite like them without the ball, but let's do it for fun anyway. So this is the only part of the image that I'm compositing. Let's go to blur, motion blur, just selecting obviously the top section. The angle of the ball is going to be coming kind of from that way, even though I did kind of like that look. So look at that again. It looks like the ball's spinning head over, like a topspin shot. It actually looks pretty cool. I think if you go with the obvious angle that's coming at, I don't think it works as well. No, I quite like that. Thank you for showing me that as the first one in Photoshop. And then obviously you can take the speed off it a bit. I kind of like it a bit more, a little bit of a shine on the ball. Let's have a look at that. I don't know. I'll be interested to see what you guys think. I don't know if I should darken the ball maybe a bit. That's pretty cool. If it's too far in the Does it need to come into the corner a little bit more? Over the pants is pretty cool, so it just kind of gives you that connection as though it's pretty real. There you go. All right, so next question, should we be desaturating this ball to maybe a white ball? So let's go down to desaturate, and let's just paint this desaturated with a, just be careful you don't desaturate the other aspects of the image. You're going to have to go a little bit further because with the blur tool, it actually, the color blurs in a little bit further than, just paint that back in there. Okay. Then you can obviously control the whiteness on the ball. I'm not 100% sure. Maybe you can leave your comments whether you bring a ball in or not. I think what's missing off the ball is sort of water spraying. I think that would help the shot a lot. Like you actually can see sprays of water coming off the ball, so you could Photoshop in sort of sprays of water as it's whipping past. But then again, that's defeating the point of the shoot. I'm trying to do it in as less shots as possible. So yeah, that's interesting. And then I've got, obviously we've got Tegan that we still need to do as well. Let's bring that ball back in here. Let's bring the, yeah, so we've got to paint that back in as well. Obviously you could use a selection tool, but I'm doing this as quick as I can for you guys. Ball looks a little bit funny shaped. Motion blur. I'm not so sure what's happening on the bottom of it though. Kind of like that again because of that shadow that's falling underneath. A little bit less blur. More blur. Okay, I can see where I'm missing on my mask. So now with the mask I can come in and do a better job. Kyla's one there. Tegan one is here. So let's go take the, desaturate it a bit. Just make sure we don't desaturate a lot of the water. There's just a little bit of color in that water. So you can actually see here now. So there's with the ball, there's without the ball. There's with the ball, with the ball, without the ball, with the ball, without the ball. Now you can see where I started. I started on the right hand side at the beginning of the shoot. And that was the shot that I got in the end. So yeah, these are the two shots that I finally got in the end. Not exactly where I wanted them to be, kind of the vision that I had initially, but I'm happy considering the conditions we had and limitations. I'm pretty happy with them. I really enjoyed the shoot. I'm so grateful my girls were able to help me. Obviously I didn't get it down perfect. There was a lot of aspects of the shoot that I got horribly wrong. My control of my light was really weak at the back through some things that were out of my control. So there were definitely aspects I would improve on, but hopefully you've learned something from this and maybe something you could use in your shoot, whether a lockdown shoot or whether you're out and about, and bring in some techniques with some flash. One thing I will note, maybe just like in relation to what I've done here and editing in general, is that every job that I do, whether it be personal or not, everyone is a separate catalog. I don't use a master catalog where everything sits in it and I can access it. You're going to battle with your Lightroom performance if you start getting really big with those catalogs. Not only that, every time you optimize when you save, it's a longer process. And what I really like about making individual catalogs is that it's totally separate in the sense that when I save my catalog, I'm saving it to Dropbox immediately. Where I can, I create smart previews, so there's a smart preview associated. So wherever I am in the world at any time, if I've got my laptop with me, or even if I go into a place that has Lightroom loaded onto a studio or someone else's computer, I can access those catalogs, show them how I've edited it, and actually then save low-res images that I can share with people anywhere, at any time. Not only that, is if I'm on a shoot where I'm responsible for the first part of the edit as the photographer, the pick and the basic edit of where I want the image to look at, I can do that, remove the images that I didn't use, save that catalog out to Dropbox, which is where I store my catalogs, and then share with the editor, wherever that person is in the world, that catalog, and then separately send them in a second folder or even in the same folder all the raw images. They can then load it up their side. They can see exactly where I left off from, or started the starting point that they need to start from, and edit away. And then at any stage, I can go back onto that same folder, open it up on my computer, and I can see the work and the progress they've made just by seeing how they've edited it, and then we can correspond. Then in the end, once I've edited my job, that edited job in JPEG form goes into a master catalog. So I do have a reference point for all my work in JPEG, because I don't go backwards. I don't normally work backwards. I don't edit a job and then years later go back and edit it again. I've got to keep moving forward. I just don't have the time to go backwards. So it's perfectly fine for me to have a JPEG master catalog where I can just reference it by date, name, things like that. So I can always access it like an archive. But all my live sort of up-to-date edits that I'm doing now are all separate catalogs. So that's something maybe to consider, and I might bring that into whatever tutorial that I do as well. But yeah, thanks so much. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it was beneficial. I will be doing an XT4 follow-up on the camera because I did points 1, 2, and 3, three aspects of the camera that I really I think have improved. I'm going to try to do a 4, 5, and 6 sometime soon, so look out for that. Thanks so much for your time and watching this video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you like what you see here, please go visit my channel. There's a lot more reviews and tutorials that I put on my channel. If you like what you see there, do subscribe, like the videos. All those things do help my channel a lot. So it's much appreciated, and God bless.